I always thought I had a stable life. A good job, a perfect husband, a home without cracks. But then, one name changed everything. Alex. At first he was just a stranger, a passionate young artist I happened to meet. But I never imagined he wouldn't just walk into my life, he would also end up in my husband's arms. From that moment on, I was no longer sure if I was the betrayer or the betrayed. I used to believe in the stability of my marriage. My husband, Daniel, was a respected professor, a man of intellect and discipline. To everyone around us, we were the perfect couple, successful, devoted, and unshaken by time. I believed it too, until the cracks in our foundation became impossible to ignore. It started with small things. The late-night phone calls he would take in hushed tones, the sudden need to stay longer at work, the distant look in his eyes when he thought I wasn't watching. I told myself it was nothing, just stress, just routine. But deep down, something in me had already shifted. Then, one evening, I overheard a conversation, just a fragment of a whispered exchange through the thin walls of our home office. A name, Alex. At first it didn't mean anything, just another colleague, perhaps a student, someone from Daniel's world. But the way he spoke, the softness in his voice, the way his breath caught as he said the name, I knew. It wasn't nothing. I should have confronted him then and there, but I hesitated. Instead, I did something I never thought I would. I started looking for answers in the quiet spaces of our home, checking his messages when he left his phone unattended, tracing the lies hidden in his daily routines. And that's when I found them. The texts, the emails, the lingering words of longing between my husband and another man, between Daniel and Alex. A younger man, a passionate, talented artist who had somehow slipped into my husband's life, and into his heart. My breath had caught in my throat that night, reading those messages in the dim glow of my phone screen. A part of me wanted to throw the device against the wall, to wake Daniel up and demand answers. But instead, I sat there in silence, the weight of the truth pressing down on me. I wasn't just losing my husband. I had already lost him. And now, I had a choice to make. Would I let this betrayal consume me, or would I take control before I shattered completely? I needed to see Alex for myself. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those words again, those messages between my husband and Alex. Words filled with longing, with hidden promises, with a love that had nothing to do with me. By morning, I had made my decision. I had to meet him. It wasn't difficult to find Alex. His name appeared more times in Daniel's inbox than I could count, and a quick search revealed exactly who he was. A gifted painter, younger than Daniel by at least a decade, with striking features and an undeniable charm. His art studio was in a quiet corner of the city, nestled between bookstores and coffee shops, a place Daniel had visited more than I cared to think about. I arrived just before noon, my heart pounding as I pushed open the heavy glass door. The scent of paint and turpentine filled the air, mixing with something softer like lavender and old books. The walls were lined with canvases, splashes of color frozen in time, and in the center of the room, standing before an unfinished piece, was him, Alex. He turned when he heard the door, his blue eyes meeting mine without hesitation. There was no fear in them, no guilt, just curiosity. He didn't recognize me. Why would he? I was just Daniel's wife, the woman in the shadows of their stolen moments. "Can I help you?" His voice was smooth, careful. I should have planned what to say. I should have come with an accusation, a demand, something to make him feel the betrayal I had felt. But standing there, looking at him, I felt something entirely different. Confusion. Because he didn't seem like the villain of my story. He looked sad. "I know who you are," I said finally, my voice steady even as my hands trembled at my sides. "I know about you and Daniel." A flicker of something crossed his face, gone too fast for me to decipher. He exhaled, setting down his paintbrush, and for a moment, we just stood there staring at each other. "I see," he murmured. He didn't deny it. He didn't try to explain or defend himself. That should have made it easier, but it didn't. "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking on the single word. Alex didn't answer right away. He walked past me toward the window, looking out at the street below as if the answer was written somewhere out there. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than before. "I didn't steal him from you," he said. "He came to me because he was already lost." I repeated them over and over in my head as I walked, my legs carrying me forward without direction. I should have felt anger or betrayal, or at the very least a desperate need to confront Daniel. Instead, I felt emptiness. When did he become lost? Had I noticed? Had I ignored it? I didn't want to go home. Not yet. So I found myself in a small cafe, the kind where no one asks questions, where strangers exist side by side without intruding on each other's pain. I ordered a coffee, wrapped my hands around the warmth of the cup, and stared at the dark liquid inside as if it held the answers I needed. Then my phone rang. Daniel. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the screen. I should ignore it. I should let him feel the uncertainty I had felt for months. But something inside me, a part I wasn't ready to name, wanted to hear his voice. So I answered. Where are you? His voice was steady, but I could hear the tension underneath. He was nervous. He knew. I took a sip of coffee before answering, keeping my voice as neutral as I could. Out. A pause. We need to talk. I almost laughed. Now he wanted to talk? After all the lies, the late nights, the stolen whispers in the dark? But instead of lashing out, I simply said, Do we? Silence stretched between us. For the first time, I was in control of the conversation, and I could feel him struggling. Please, he finally said, come home. And against my better judgment, I did. I arrived just past sunset. The house felt different, colder, heavier, like the walls themselves knew what had happened. Daniel was waiting in the living room, sitting on the couch with his hands clasped together. He looked up when I entered, relief flickering in his eyes before uncertainty took over. You saw him. It wasn't a question. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked past him, setting my bag down on the table, waiting for him to speak first. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I didn't want you to find out like this. A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. How did you want me to find out, Daniel? Through another late-night excuse? Another forgotten anniversary? He flinched. Good. He stopped, exhaling heavily. I never wanted to hurt you. And yet, he had. Again and again. I looked at him then, really looked at him. The man I had loved, the man I had built a life with. But instead of the regret I expected to feel, something else settled inside me, clarity. I took a deep breath. Tell me the truth, Daniel. Do you love him? The air between us froze. For a long time he didn't answer. And then, finally, so quietly I almost didn't hear it, he said, I don't know. And somehow that answer hurt more than anything else. Daniel's words echoed in my mind. I don't know. Not yes, not no. Just a fragile, wavering uncertainty that felt like a dagger to my chest. I let the silence stretch between us, thick and suffocating, waiting for him to say something, anything, that would make sense of this mess. But he didn't. He only sat there, looking at me with those tired, conflicted eyes, as if he were expecting me to decide for him. And maybe, for the first time, I realized I wasn't going to. I straightened my back, forcing myself to speak. Then you need to figure it out, Daniel, because I'm done waiting for you to make up your mind. He inhaled sharply, as if my words had struck him, but I didn't give him the chance to respond. I turned on my heel and walked away, heading straight to our bedroom. No, my bedroom now. I locked the door behind me, leaning against it as I exhaled shakily. My hands trembled, my chest ached, but for the first time in a long time I felt a strange sense of control. I wouldn't let his uncertainty define me. The next few days were a blur. Daniel tried to talk to me, but I kept my distance. I barely spoke to him unless necessary. We still lived under the same roof, but it felt like we were strangers, passing in the night. And yet, I couldn't escape the weight of everything. Late at night, when the house was quiet, my thoughts would spiral. Had it all been a lie? The love we built, the years we spent together, was it all destined to unravel like this? One evening, as I sat in the kitchen, mindlessly stirring a cup of tea, my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. We should talk. I knew who it was before I even opened it. Alex? My fingers hesitated over the screen. I should ignore him. After all, what good would it do to speak to the man who had taken everything from me? But another part of me, a part I hated, was curious. I took a deep breath and replied. Where? An hour later, I found myself outside a quiet cafe, the kind tucked away in the corners of the city, where secrets could be spoken without fear of being overheard. Alex was already there, sitting at a corner table. He looked different from the last time I saw him, tired, tense, almost hesitant. "Thanks for coming," he said as I sat down. I studied him, searching for the arrogance I expected, but it wasn't there. He looked uncertain, maybe even regretful. "I don't know why I did," I admitted, my voice steady. "What do you want, Alex?" He sighed, leaning forward. "I just need you to know something." I crossed my arms. "Go on." He hesitated, and for a moment I thought he might back out, but then, in a quiet voice, he said, "Daniel's been lying to both of us." My breath caught. "What do you mean?" Alex met my eyes, and for the first time I saw something I hadn't expected. Pain. "I wasn't the first," he whispered, and just like that, my world shattered all over again. My pulse pounded in my ears. "I wasn't the first." Alex's words hung between us, heavy and suffocating. I stared at him, my hands gripping the edge of the table to steady myself. "What are you saying?" My voice was barely above a whisper. Alex sighed, rubbing his temples before meeting my gaze. "Daniel, he's done this before. I didn't know at first, but when things got serious between us, I started noticing things, patterns, the way he kept me hidden, the way he always had an excuse. So I dug deeper." A sickening chill crept down my spine, and his jaw tightened. "I found messages, hotel receipts, names. I confronted him about it, and he admitted it. I thought I was different, that maybe he'd leave you for me, but he never intended to. I was just another secret." The air felt thick, pressing against my chest. The betrayal I thought I had already processed, twisted into something deeper, something more unbearable. "So you weren't the only one," I murmured. "No." His voice was quiet but firm. "And neither were you." The finality of those words sent a sharp, painful crack through me. All these years I had convinced myself that our marriage, however flawed, had been real, that I had been real to him, but now that illusion was crumbling before my eyes. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. "Why are you telling me this now, Alex?" He hesitated before answering. "Because you deserve to know, and because I regret it." He exhaled shakily. "I never meant to fall for a man who would do this. I never meant to hurt you. I wanted to hate him. I should have hated him. But as I looked at him, truly looked at him, I saw someone just as broken as I was. Someone who had also been deceived, played like a pawn in Daniel's selfish game." I pushed my chair back abruptly, needing space, needing air. Alex didn't try to stop me. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice softer now. I let out a hollow laugh. "No, but I will be." He nodded as if he understood. "If you ever want to talk." He pulled out a small notepad from his pocket, scribbled something down, and slid it across the table. His number. I hesitated before picking it up. I wasn't sure if I'd ever use it, but for the first time I realized that Alex wasn't my enemy. Daniel was. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the cafe, my mind racing. For so long I had been trapped in this cycle, waiting for Daniel, hoping for him, believing in him. But now, I saw the truth, and there was no going back. As I stepped onto the cold, bustling street, I made a silent promise to myself. I wouldn't let this break me. Daniel had taken enough from me already, and soon he was going to lose everything.